Hallie says subscribe to this channel and follow and like and share and all those YouTube things. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, Turner and I are messing with suspension on a 350Z or G35. They are the same. And some really important things that we're doing here are bushing.
We're gonna have to watch to make sure the edge of the arm doesn't hit. If it does, we're gonna have to raise up the bushing a little bit so that we can, thank you for helping me, Chris. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you, Sol. That are all shot and replacing them with spherical bearings. So I thought it would be cool to just shoot a video and show you guys exactly how to do that so you can tackle it at home and not be so scared. When you look at these things, you know, they are very big and beefy. And especially on these older cars, you know, you can see the rubber is completely destroyed. And on a bearing that or bushing that big, like, they are completely not doing their job at all. So if you're not familiar, a bushing's job is to try and keep the suspension in its correct spot, but negate some of the noise, vibration, and harshness, as well as give it a little bit of flex for some of the differences in the road. Now, on a race car, you want to take away all of that so you can have the exact same alignment of whatever specs you have put, and it stays that way the whole way. So you can see that these are a huge replacement, and you designed these, didn't you, Turner?
These are actually around before me.
Okay.
I have made a few changes. We added this little lip here to allow the bearing to articulate a little bit more for you drifty boys.
Okay.
This arm gets really stretched when you put high angle. So we added the extra lip here to allow for a little bit more articulation. We have the rubber in there so it doesn't make a lot of noise when we're going through the suspension travel. Pressing in bearings is not the easiest thing in the world. It is a bit time consuming and you really have to use some thought as to how you're going to do each one, but
right.
It's definitely something that you can do with the stuff that's in your garage. We have everything we need at the shop, but I brought none of it over to the fielding shop.
And my shop is very DIY, like grassroots, so.
So I wanted to prove that if you take a little bit of time and look around the shop, you can find something that will work perfectly fine to install every single one of these bushings. So yes, it's going to take a little while. It's going to take a little bit of thought process, but there is something available for all of these.
Yeah, and this is definitely a huge upgrade. Some of the tools we have laid out, we've got safety protection, you know, gloves and safety glasses. You are going to need some snap ring pliers, and then various sockets, and a pair of calipers also helps quite a bit. And then other than that, we will just kind of figure out what we need along the way and look around and scavenge and find it.
And find your friend that has a Harbor Freight press.
Yeah.
That makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, you're going to need a press for sure. You know, we've got just a cheap Harbor Freight press here. And
well, you don't necessarily need a press for sure.
Oh, okay.
You can use the C-clamp style ball joint presses.
Okay.
It's going to use a lot more upper body strength.
I see. I don't have
but you can use those C-clamp presses for most everywhere on the suspension.
That's good to know. And you can rent those at auto parts stores.
Oh, you can get them for free from auto parts stores for rental
Perfect.
for a few hours if you need them.
Okay. Very cool. All right, so just stick around. We're going to show you the whole process, and that way at home you can be confident to know that you can do this too. Pretty simple setup. You basically get yourself a socket that's correct diameter to where it's going to push on them without deforming any of the soft aluminum arm. And then you get yourself a press. This is a simple press, like $100 from
Harbor Freight.
Yeah, Harbor Freight or whatever. So it doesn't, you know, cost a lot. Again, we're reinforcing the fact that you can work on these cars at home in a garage with a buddy and, you know, some simple hand tools.
So one of your friends has this press
100%,
in their garage.
Yeah.
One of your buddies 100% has one of these presses.
Yeah. The process is pretty simple. Just time lapse it real quick and knock it out. Did it hit your foot?
It always does.
Safety first, y'all.
It's part of the process.
All right, but it's out.
Comes out super easy. Nice and clean bore. You want to, if you do nick the edges, make sure you clean it up. If you look carefully, you see that this side has a chamfer, this side's flat, or was.
Yeah.
You want to press in to the side with the chamfer. It's going to make your life a lot easier. keeps the bearing from walking as you press it in.
Makes sense. The next step we're going to take is installing these really nice spherical bushing replacements. They're going to be called a bearing.
So we've got both bushings pressed out. We're about to press the monoballs in. One super important key to that is you always want to press on the housing. Do not press on the spacer. If you take the spacers out, you don't want to press on the ball. You want to press on this outer housing. So bearings are only meant to take radial force. What that means is forces that go out from the diameter of the bushing.
Okay.
They're not meant to take axial forces, which is along this direction. If it sees an axial force, it puts a large amount of load on that Teflon liner, which it is not supposed to see. It will beat out that Teflon liner and you'll get play in the bearing. The quickest way to ruin a bearing is to press on the bearing itself. Always press on the housing. That applies to every single bearing in every single location on your car. Always, always, always press on the housing. That is key. So what we're going to do, I'm not going to use this edge because it's flat. We got a nice little 90 degree there. You want to use this chamfered edge. It's going to make it press in straight for sure.
So do we need to lube this or anything, or it goes in dry?
Should go in dry.
Okay.
One thing that we should do before we install is measure the diameter here.
Okay.
Just to be safe. So you'll want to clean up any nicks or chips that may have happened when you were pressing it out. Say the socket walked a little bit and you took a little chunk off right here. Not a huge deal. Clean it up with a file or some sandpaper until it's nice and smooth. But before you press these in, we don't want you to damage this bushing and figure out it's the incorrect size. So what you want to do, you want to measure this diameter and this diameter, and make sure that this is 0.003 to 0.005 larger than this bore right here. It's a really good idea to have a set of calipers around the shop if you're doing any sort of press fits. It makes a huge difference. You can get a set at Harbor Freight for 20, 25 bucks.
All right, let me go grab my calipers.
So you're gonna have your cheap set of calipers. You want to zoom them all the way in, zero it out. I use inches on a lot of my measurements. You can use millimeters as well. So we're gonna measure this diameter here. Looking at, and always take a few measurements to make sure you're actually square on it. So it looks like we're measuring about 1.569 inches there. And we're gonna do the bore here. The best way to do a bore is lightly press while you rotate around until you see the largest value. Make sure you're keeping it square. So we're looking at about 1.564 at its widest, which puts us at about 0.005 difference between the two. Totally acceptable. You at least want 1,000 over the bore diameter, preferably 3. If you are worried about the press fit, get the measurements and shoot it over to our email address, and I'll let you know if it's something to be concerned about.
So what if it doesn't fit?
If it doesn't fit, you probably have an aftermarket arm, or you damage the bushing as you're pressing it out. We rarely have an issue where these don't fit. Check for a Nissan part number on the arm before you purchase, just to make sure you're not gonna, get deep into a project and figure out you've got the wrong arm sitting on your car. Lots of these cars are 12 to 15 years old. A previous owner may have replaced an arm that you don't know about. We don't want you to get these nice bearings in and figure out, oh, they won't work on my arm. Luckily, you can get some OEM parts for pretty cheap nowadays online. You're not going to spend a ton of money to get a new arm, and you can press the bearings out. If you do have the OEM arm, the body of it's always going to be fine. All you're ever going to need to do is replace these bearings.
Okay. And did you guys see too on the caliper here, the way he measured the difference? You've got two different parts. The outer diameter is measured with this part, but then the ID is measured right over here. So just make sure you're paying attention to that, exactly how these work.
All right, so I'm gonna, with my hand, just gently rock this around until it feels like it's pretty square. Because it has that chamfer there, it's gonna square it up for you as you press it in. And then I got a deep socket. This one happens to be a 1 1/16, but it fits really nicely on the housing. but doesn't go over the edge. That's the key. You want it to be on this flat, but not go over the housing.
And not catch the middle part either, right?
That's the key.
Right
You
here.
really don't want it to touch this. So all the pressure needs to be on the housing. So we're gonna line it up right here. You got a nice flat surface. And make sure it's going in evenly on both sides. So you see how it was a little bit crooked at the beginning?
Yeah, I did.
But as it presses in, it goes in nice and smooth. The pressure that it's going to require to press it in is going to increase as you press the arm down because you have more surface area. If it starts to get really hard, that means either you bottomed it out on something, so please don't do that because that's going to put that axial force, or it's a little crooked. If that's the case, go back, press it out the other side a little bit, and see what's going on before you press it through. This aluminum is soft. You do not want to ruin the bearing cup. You're going to press it down until you're nice and flush. I felt the edge of the housing catch on this back side. It's nice and tight. It requires a lot more force to press, so that means I'm done. So we're going to loosen this, take it off. Look at that. It's perfectly flush on this side. Fits really nicely. We're going to repeat the process right here.
Oh yeah, that looks great.
So on this one, you see how I don't have a flat surface here?
Yeah.
We're gonna need to put a bearing or a flat surface that raises this portion so that we have a flat surface to press on. You never wanna press on something at an angle like this. It will either ruin the arm or ruin the bearing. So what I'm gonna do, just grab a piece of wood. That one's a little too wide. This is nice and narrow. Let's see if we can make that one work right there. Ooh, actually that won't work. We have the spacers, so we have to have something that has a hole in it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna need to get some pipe.
Can we pull the spacer off?
So one thing you can do is take the spacers out. Sometimes we have them in really tight, so it can be a pain, especially on these inner bushings. We make them really tight so that this ring fits very nicely. These are to prevent any NVH from when it rocks back and forth.
Yeah, I was wondering what's up with that ring. What is that thing made out of?
This one is a PTFE ring. It's very similar to the Teflon actually.
Okay.
That's in the liner. It's just a lot thicker, a lot harder. It's a really hard plastic is all that is. And it really just prevents a little bit of articulation here. These bearings don't really need to articulate very much.
Okay.
Just a little bit of wiggle room. The sway bar is mounted on the lower control arm right here. And when there's force on it, it tries to rock the arm. And you don't want it rocking back and forth because your shock is a clevis here. You don't want this beating against the inside of your shock. So we provide these little spacers to prevent that from happening. They will wear out over time, but they cost like 10 cents a piece. Just give us a call and we can get some shipped your way. If you can't get this out, you can press it through because you're not going to press and make an axial force on this bearing if there's nothing coming out the backside. So
now we get our block of wood.
Chamfers on this side. That's the side we're going to use. Got a nice flat surface there. Gonna raise the jack up a little bit if we can. Doesn't look like we can.
Can we get a shallow socket?
Nope, we're just going to move it down a notch.
Okay.
Want to redo that part?
No, it's fine. I want to show people how to move it. So you see these pins right here, they just come out and slide it down to the spot and then boom. Now you can...
Generally a good idea to take these parts off beforehand. I've knocked them on my feet before. It is not a good time. The closer you can start it to the press, the less you have to do this.
Yeah. Some guys will be better at that motion than others.
I don't know what you're talking about, Billy.
I'm just trolling. Don't pay attention to me. All right, so we need to slide over a touch.
I'm gonna loosen this up just a skosh. Get it nice and close. You want this pretty centered.
Yep.
Good there. And look, just going in nice and smooth.
All right. A lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure. go back through. I'm gonna swap out that wood just to be safe.
So we're close, but obviously not finished.
Nope.
Do you want me to get you a piece of metal?
That would probably be best.
All right, let me find something. Oh, here's a rotor. See if that works. So we couldn't quite get it to work with the wood, so I got a piece of tubing right here, but the bottom wasn't quite flat. So I just got this little piece of metal here as a shim, and we got it lined up to where it's exactly perfectly gonna work now. I got a short socket, so we will finish the press.
And looks like we're in.
Shim
Stop
didn't
pressing. Let's see where we are at.
All right, so now we just repeat the same for the other side.
Yes. So one thing I would suggest doing before y'all install them on the car is stick a screwdriver or a bolt through it. There is a breakthrough tolerance that these have. So there's a little bit of force that it requires before they're able to move pretty freely. I would do that before you install it. It'll make installing the arm and the shock on a lot easier. So do that with all the rod ends that you're installing on the car, all the bearings. It's not a bad idea to break these free before you do the initial install.
We had to get crafty on this one. This is an old pulley from some car that I don't even know.
What you're looking for is something that is smaller than this OD, but just barely. You want it to just barely fit inside the bore without touching it. So we're gonna use this, and look, it's working fantastically. Just make sure you get something that's not gonna explode. And then now that it's mostly out, because this isn't going to be able to go much deeper, we'll pop it out with a hammer. So we got this in nice and flat.
So same as before, we look for the chamfer to edge, get the bearing ready, square as possible, get something. This is actually a little bit too large, this piece.
But because we're not pressing it through anything,
right,
that's fine. That's why we can use this instead of that wonky pulley we use to press it up. But there's always something around the shop you can use. See how it rocked back and forth at the beginning there, and then it centered itself? That's all because of the chamfer, but you want to make sure that's happening. But it should go in nice and smoothly like this. You should see it move down every single time you press. And if you see it don't move when you press, that means something is in the way. And now we're nice and flush. We're going to pop this off. Beautiful new bearing and the compression rod. This is probably the most important bushing to replace in the suspension on a 350Z. These cars are a minimum of 10 years old at this point, 12 years old at this point. So having these bushings replaced is key, because these are the bushings that see all your braking force, and braking force is the largest force that your car is going to see. So whenever you hit the brakes really hard, this bushing...
Sorry.
What's up, Soul? This bushing deflects massively because there's a lot of rubber there, as you can tell from the pressed out middle piece.
Yeah.
There's not much holding it in place, so that means this is going to move a lot. That means you're going to get really big toe changes under braking. You definitely don't want that. It makes the car feel really unstable. So this is a very big upgrade to the feel of your suspension.
So as a general rule, the bigger the bushing or the more rubber, the worse it is.
The worse the deflection is, yes, in most cases.
All right, guys, you can see we've got the rear upper control arm here. We are doing the same process. This one's a little bit different because we have two bushings that press out the same direction. But Turner's got a 1-inch socket here, and it's coming right out. You can see this one has like a sleeve or a kind of a race looking deal.
Go slowly on this one.
Yeah.
There's not really many good ways to press this bushing out. You need a very intricate press to do it appropriately, which would be to support it here. But there's not much room because there's this lip. One thing you can do is cut these bushings out.
Okay.
It's also an option. So you'd use a hole saw that's bigger than this and cut the rubber out, and then use a reciprocating saw to cut that sleeve.
Makes sense.
The arm will bend a little bit slightly as you're pressing this. If you start to put a lot of force, you can permanently bend it. So I've done this quite a few times on a few arms, You want to make sure you're not bending this a bunch. If you do start to see it deforming a bunch before the bearing moves, stop and find another way to press it out. But after a little pressure was applied, this bearing is going to come out nice and easy. And we've got this bearing out. The issue was, as I said, this sleeve makes things a lot more difficult. You can cut that off.
All right, now how are we gonna do the bottom one, tough guy?
That one's a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
Let me think on it for a moment.
Maybe like an extension off of this that goes through here.
Yeah,
but then how do we grab the bottom?
Exactly. We're gonna have to find a way to grab the bottom of this bearing. We'll figure that out. Give me just a moment.
All right. All right, we've got a setup here that we think is gonna work. If not, I will edit this out.
Yeah, that's not gonna work.
Okay.
You see the lines we drew here. You can cut with a Dremel or a cutoff wheel some flats off of this so that the arm itself is exposed, not the bushing, and use that surface there to press on so you can get the bearing out.
So you can see on this bushing here, we cut it a couple spots so that we were able to get this flat spot to rest on the press and then able to exert the pressure on there.
Or you can take a hole saw that fits between the metal and the rubber right there. That's what I did. And you hole saw through and the sleeve will come out and you get a hacksaw and cut through this sleeve. It goes really quickly. The second you cut through this sleeve and into this wall, you should be able to fit a screwdriver in there and tap it and it'll slide out because it's relieved all the pressure. That's the way I do it, but if you don't have access to those tools, you can cut off 2 flats and press it all the way through.
So now we've got a 36 mil socket, which the new bearing fits nicely inside of. You can see here, slips right in, no problem. And we're doing it in reverse. So this time we're actually gonna press on the arm itself in order to, and we're gonna let the bearing sit flat on the plate there. Just like that. And again, I'm surprised there's no lube that goes on this, but it's because you don't necessarily want this to spin or move. I guess
It's just not necessary.
Yeah.
It is cut to the appropriate diameter for a press fit, so you shouldn't need any lube. You can lube it if it makes you feel more comfortable,
that's not gonna go.
but
You're gonna loosen that.
you can if it makes you feel more comfortable, but it's not necessary.
I like the lube.
Make sure it's going on straight, boys and girls. So once I get this near the bottom, I'm going to loosen the pressure and make sure
Square this up.
that, yeah, the big socket is nice and square so we don't ruin that lip and bend it over. It'll make your life a lot harder if that happens. So I'm going to stop right there. We'll relieve the pressure a little bit. We're going to square it up. Put pressure back on. And beauty.
Nice. Look at that.
You're going to want to check inside that snap ring groove to see if there's any aluminum from the arm. Clean it out a little bit, then throw the snap ring back on.
What's up, pup? What you
up,
doing?
dude?
You getting dirty?
Getting dirty.
You sure are.
Don't get us dirty, please. I'm already dirty enough. Fill
try-
this car.
You trying to
Yeah.
press? You trying to press some bushing, Soul?
You just the most.
Isn't he? That's a good boy.
Got in the most difficult place.
Okay. Yeah, I love you too. Oh my gosh. All right. Yep. Okay, we got work to do, Soul. Go on.
And the next bushing should be a lot easier. We shouldn't have to stack
So,
anything nearly this high. These ones do get a little bit complicated. We're gonna have to watch to make sure the edge of the arm doesn't hit. If it does, we're gonna have to raise up the bushing a little bit so that we can. Thank you for helping me press. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you, Soul.
You are wet and smell like wet dog. Oh, buddy.
So you're watching the arm here.
And we're touching. So I'm gonna have to raise this up just a skosh. The dog is not camera shy.
No.
We're on.
Nice.
Now we have some super sweet spherical bearings in your rear upper arms. No more rear deflection, no more camber change at the limit. That's the big one that you're gonna get. Some excessive camber or a decrease in camber depending on the direction you're going.
All right, last step is to install the snap rings. These are just, again, a retention item that go on the outside edge of the new bearings we just pressed in.
It's just an extra safety feature. But when installing snap rings, wear safety equipment.
Yeah.
These fly off, they hurt.
They do, and they always hit you in the face.
At the very least, wear safety goggles. They're not going to fly off at a degree that it's going to super damage your face, but they could damage your eyes, so definitely wear something to protect your eyes when you're putting these on. These are also the wrong safety.
Yeah, these are the wrong pliers. That's my bad. I don't have the other kind.
Which makes this super fun to do.
Yeah.
But you're going to expand these out as best you can.
Oh, look at that, you did it.
And I'm just going to wiggle this side into place. And go all the way around. Make sure it went in.
There you go.
It goes in that groove nice.
Very nice.
If you want to tap the edges of it with a flathead to make sure it goes all the way in, just go around the edge and push them in. It's not a bad idea. So once you get the bearings pressed in, everything's in there nice and tight. What you're going to want to do is break the bearings free of their initial torque. It's going to take a little bit of heaving and hauling on them. This shows that they're nice and tight inside their housing, but once you break them free, it's a little bit easier to move them, which will make installation on the car a lot easier. So move them around a little bit, and that way you can move them as you put them on the car so they can line up with the bolt holes on the chassis. Yeah. Makes life way easier when you're doing your installation.
And so this is something I learned myself. You know, you might grab some Heim joints or get some in a kit that you buy from any brand, and you can spin them around and feel them and stuff. Well, that's actually not good. You should not be able to move them by hand. And that's something that Turner just taught me, that, you know, the quality bearings, the FKs that they use, you cannot move them by hand.
When you first get them.
When they're brand new, right.
As these break in, you are going to be able to move them around. What you don't want, like we've spoken on before, is axial play. You don't want them to be able to jiggle back and forth. You don't want to feel any play in this direction. It should be able to move pretty free. After they've been on the car for a while, they should be able to move pretty freely in a rotational sense, but nothing along the axis.
Got it. Pro tips.
It's just a few lines.
Hallie says subscribe to this channel and follow and like and share and all those YouTube things.
Okay.